When I watched my 80-year-old grandpa hook the keys to that HOA cop's truck and drive it right into the creek, I knew this war was coming to an end. But what I didn't know was that it was only just beginning. It all started when Chad Morrison, this self-appointed HOA security director, thought that our family property was his personal parking lot. 7 months of him parking that matte black Ram 2600 right at our ranch gate. 6 months of us calling, writing letters begging, and 6 months of him laughing in our faces. But when he groped my girlfriend, that was the drop that broke the dam. Let me tell you the story about why you shouldn't ever mess with an 80-year-old farmer with 39 years of heavy machinery know-how. Drop a comment below about where you're watching from. Now let's dive into this tale. My name is Jake Thompson, and before this debacle began, life was good. I graduated from Texas A&M with an ag business degree and came back to assist Grandpa, how run our 200-acre ranch outside Austin. The Thompson family had owned this property since 1923 through the Depression. 2 world wars and numerous droughts. Grandpa always used to say, "When your roots run deeper than your neighbor's fence posts, you don't budge for anyone." Our ranch sat where the old country road meant newer subdivision developments. It used to be all farmland, but in the last 4 years, these upscale HOA communities started popping up like mushrooms after rain. That's where Chad Morrison stepped into the picture. First time I saw him, he was stepping out of that absurd truck, all blacked out windows, oversized tires, and chrome accoutrements. The guy looked like he was compensating for something. He was maybe 6'2", with the kind of physique that said he used to work out, but had been letting beer do the heavy lifting for a while now. It was a Tuesday morning in January when he first parked that monster across our main gate. I was going out to check cattle when I spotted it. This huge black truck parked across the entrance, like a New Berlin Wall. At first I thought he was lost. Maybe the GPS glitched. I walked up and rapped on the driver's window. When it rolled down, I got a good look at Chad Morrison. His face had that chronic scowl some people get from spending so much time angry at the world. "Excuse me, sir, but you're blocking our entrance," I said, staying polite. Chad looked me over like I was something he'd scraped off his boot. "Your entrance, according to the HOA property survey, this is community access road public right-of-way." My jaw clamped shut. This was our land, had been for 100 years. I think there's been a mistake. This is private property, the Thompson Ranch. We've got deeds to go back to 1923. Chad's laugh made my skin crawl. "Listen here, farm boy, times change. This entire area is under HOA jurisdiction. Now you got a problem with that. Take it up with the board." That's when Chad's attitude changed from condescending to threatening. He stepped out using his height to make me feel small. "You don't want trouble, then maybe you shouldn't be touching my vehicle." He whipped out his phone and began recording. "I'm documenting this encounter for the HOA board. Harassment by property owner, attempted damage to HOA security vehicle." I took a step back, hands raised. "Man, I'm just trying to get to my cattle. Can we work something out?" Chad propped against his truck, arms crossed. "Here's what we're going to work out, Junior. I park where I need to park to get the job done. Your little farm here, it's ruining the look of our community. The HOA board is considering zoning for this entire area. Might be time to sell, move somewhere more country." The way he said country made it sound like a dirty word. I stood there trying to make sense of all this. This guy had just informed me my family's Century Ranch was ruining the aesthetic of his community and offered suggestions that we sell. "Look, Chad, that's Mr. Morrison to you. Farm boy, Mr. Morrison. This is land owned by my family. We're not going anywhere, but we can be decent neighbors. Maybe we can work out some sort of schedule." Chad laughed, shook his head. "You still don't understand. This isn't a discussion. This is me telling you how things are going to be." He got out of his truck, retrieved a clipboard, jotted something down, then handed me a piece of paper. "Here is the HOA's official notice. Parking enforcement. Your little farm road crosses over HOA property. I'm empowered to patrol this area on a daily basis as needed." I examined the paper. It was full of gibberish, legal-sounding phrases strung together, but it didn't look official-looking. This isn't looking right. Where's the letterhead proper? Signatures? Chad's eyes grew colder. You doubting the authority of the HOA board, son? I felt irritation burning in my chest. I'm doubting your authority to... The HOA owns this community now. Your little patch of ground is ringed by our property. We control the access roads, utilities, zoning. You want to play hardball? Go ahead, see how long you survive. With that, Chad got back in his truck, fired up that obnoxiously loud diesel engine, and drove off, but not before leaving something on my windshield. A handwritten note. This is HOA property, now deal with it. I stood there clutching that note, seething with anger and incredulity. Who the hell did this guy think he was before I could call Grandpa? I heard his old Ford pickup coming down the drive. When Grandpa Hal stopped and looked at my face, his face turned serious. I shook my head and handed him the note and told him what occurred. Grandpa read it slowly, folded it up carefully, and tucked it in his shirt pocket. Jake, he said with an unfamiliar tone, do you know that I was a combat engineer in Vietnam? I shook my head. In all 25 years, Grandpa had never spoken much of the war. Well, he went on examining the tire tracks Chad's truck had made in the gravel. Sounds like it might be time you learned a thing or two about strategy. That night, Grandpa told me things I'd never known. Harold Thompson hadn't spent his life studying at the Soil and Pasture School. He'd been in Vietnam 2 times as a combat engineer, building bridges and clearing debris. After the war, he'd used his GI benefits to purchase heavy equipment and enlarge the ranch. The thing about bullies, Jake, he said, rocking in his chair, is they always overestimate the people they're bullying. They see what they want to see, some old farmer and his grandson. They don't see the man who spent 3 years outwitting the Viet Cong. I'd always known Grandpa was tough, but I was beginning to grasp that there were depths I'd never imagined. The next morning, Chad was back. Same truck, same location, same attitude. But this time I was prepared. I'd done some research. Chad Morrison had a pretty interesting story. Public records indicated he'd been a police officer for Austin PD, who'd quit about 2 years before his separation hadn't been by choice, several complaints of excessive force and improper behavior. After that, he'd bounced from security firms before finding this HOA position. The best part, the woman who'd hired him, Margaret Morrison Blackwell, wasn't just president of the HOA board. She was also his mother-in-law. Chad's wife had divorced him around the same time he'd lost his police job, but Margaret kept him on staff as her own personal attack dog. The whole operation reeked of nepotism and small-town politics. But the real game changer was when my girlfriend Emily arrived that afternoon. Emily Rodriguez was in her final year at UT Law, working part-time at a local firm that dealt with property rights. She was brilliant, tough, and had no tolerance for bullies like Chad. When I explained what went down, her dark eyes flashed with rage. Jake, this is totally illegal. You can't just park on someone's property and assert HOA jurisdiction. Emily spent the next couple of hours on her laptop, cross-checking property records, HOA bylaws, and city ordinances. What she found was interesting. The Thompson Ranch had been here long before the existence of any HOA. Our property rights were grandfathered in under county law. More significantly, the road Chad was asserting as HOA property was actually a private easement that belonged to us. Here's the thing. Emily explained, spreading maps and documents across our kitchen table. The HOA has no legal standing to regulate your property. 0. You're not part of their community. You never signed on to their bylaws, and they can't bar access to your own land. Grandpa leaned over her shoulder, reading the paperwork with interest. So what you're saying is this Chad fellow is trespassing? Emily nodded. Not only trespassing, but possibly committing harassment and intimidation. There are serious civil and criminal offenses here. Grandpa smiled. Not his warm grandfather's smile, but something more sinister. Well then, sounds like we need to document these offenses properly. The next morning I was armed with a camera when Chad arrived, but something was off. Margaret Morrison, Blackwell, was with him. I'd seen her photo in the local newspaper, but up close she was even more formidable. Margaret was in her mid-60s with severely pulled back silver hair and the sort of ensemble that screamed wealth. She wore pearls. At 10 o'clock on a ranch road, when she emerged from Chad's pickup truck, she looked around our place like she'd discovered something distasteful. "You must be the Thompson boy," she said without offering to introduce herself. Her accent was money pure, draw-affected upper class that said she'd spent decades practicing being superior to others. "I'm Jake Thompson, ma'am. This is my family's ranch." Margaret sniffed. "Yes, well, that's what we need to talk about. Your little farm here is making quite the eyesore for our neighborhood. Property values in Pine Creek estates are suffering because of this." She waved vaguely at our ranch like it was a personal affront. I could feel my blood pressure spiking. "Ma'am, with all respect, we've been here 100 years. Your neighborhood is around 5 years old. We were here first." Chad stepped forward, his hand on what appeared to be a police-style radio. "Listen here, Junior, Mrs. Morrison. Blackwell is trying to be polite. The HOA board has been examining zoning for this whole area. There are alternatives being considered at the county level. Eminent domain, public good. You see, I didn't see, but I was getting riled up. Are you threatening to take our land away?" Margaret held up a manicured hand. "No one's threatening anything, dear. We're just looking at all of our options to preserve the character and value of our neighborhood. Perhaps you'd be willing to sell. I'm sure we could come to a fair price." What came next caught me off guard. Instead of getting furious, I began to laugh. Not because anything was particularly humorous, but because the whole scenario was so ridiculous. Here were these two individuals standing on my family's property, telling me we were destroying their neighborhood and should consider selling because our rooster was too loud. "Ma'am," I said when I finished laughing, "I admire your interest, but this ranch is not for sale. It's been in my family for 4 generations. This is our home." Margaret's smile froze. "How sad. Well, I guess we'll just have to see what legal recourse is available." Chad nodded and took a note. "Daily security patrols will still be conducted for the safety and security of Pine Creek Estates, of course." They climbed back into Chad's truck and drove away, but not before Chad shouted out, "Oh, and farm boy, that rooster of yours. The HOA noise regulation reads no animal sounds prior to 7 a.m. or after 8 p.m. I'll be keeping an eye on that close enough." As their truck drove out of sight, I realized this was bigger than Chad being an asshole. This was orchestrated, a campaign to run us out. I took out my phone to call Emily, but before I could dial, I heard another engine. Grandpa's old Ford, but he wasn't alone. There was another truck behind him. When they both stopped, Grandpa stepped out along with a man I did not recognize. A large man in his 50s wearing a khaki uniform with a badge. "Jake," Grandpa called, "I want you to meet Sheriff Johnson. Bob's an old buddy from the service. We served together in the Meong Delta." Sheriff Johnson held out his hand. "Pleasure to meet you, son. Your grandfather's told me you folks are having some difficulties with the HOA crowd." I shook his hand, bewildered. "Well, yes, sir, but I didn't know Grandpa had called him." Grandpa smiled. "Oh, I didn't call him about this. I called him about something way more interesting." Sheriff Johnson produced a folder from his truck and handed it to me. "Your grandfather asked me to do a background check on Chad Morrison. Thought you might find the results interesting." I opened the folder and my stomach lurched. Chad's police record was worse than I'd imagined. Multiple complaints for excessive force, 2 suspensions, and a final incident involving inappropriate behavior toward a female victim. A note from his commanding officer caught my eye. "Officer Morrison exhibits troubling patterns of obsessive behavior and has trouble accepting civilian authority. Recommends psychological evaluation." The guy wasn't just he was a potentially dangerous. Sheriff Johnson pointed to another page. "He's not even working for the HOA. He's working for Margaret Morrison Blackwell, personally through her own private security company. Legally speaking, he has about as much clout as a mall cop. So when he says he's enforcing HOA rules, he's effectively cosplaying." Sheriff Johnson finished. "The HOA board approved some security patrol, but Chad's version goes far beyond anything they sanctioned." The next morning brought Chad's first big escalation. I woke up to voices and music from our front gate. Looking out, I couldn't believe what I saw. Chad's truck was there, but so were 3 other vehicles. They were having a barbecue, a full-on cookout with folding chairs, portable grill, cooler full of beer, and about 6 guys I'd never met before. They'd set up right in front of our gate, blocking access to our property. When I stormed out there with Grandpa in tow, I realized it was worse than it looked. They'd pulled out our gate posts to make room and spread trash across our gravel drive. One of Chad's friends, a heavy-set guy covered in tattoos, was grilling hamburgers on our property. "What the hell is this?" I shouted over the music. Chad looked up from his lawn chair, beer in hand. "Hey there, farm boy. Just having a little community gathering. HOA business, you understand." His friends laughed. "This is private property," I said, trying to remain level. "You need to pack up and leave now." Chad stood up, slowly making a big deal out of it. "Well, that's the thing. We're having a discussion about property boundaries. According to county records, this road right here is actually a public easement. Has been since 1965. I felt Grandpa's warning hand on my shoulder. These jerks had invaded our country, relocated our gate, and were literally having a party on our land. "Chad, I'm asking you one last time to leave peacefully." Chad looked at his friends and they all laughed. "Or what, Junior? You going to call the cops? Newsflash. I know all the cops." He pulled out his phone and began dialing. My heart fell. If Chad actually had police contacts, they would take his side. But Grandpa stepped forward. "Cool as you please." "Chad, was it? I'm Harold Thompson. This is my property. You and your friends are trespassers. You've vandalized our gate posts and you've littered on our property. I'm giving you 10 minutes to clean up and depart." Chad laughed out loud. "Or what, old man, you going to sick your grandson on me?" Grandpa smiled that mean smile. "Oh no, son, I'm going to take care of this myself." He pulled out his phone and placed a call. "Bob, it's Howell. Yeah, that situation we talked about has gotten out of hand. Multiple trespassers damaged the property and wait. Is that marijuana I smell?" I took a look around and discovered one of Chad's friends was smoking something that didn't smell like tobacco. Chad's face turned white. "Bob, I think we need that deputy out here, and perhaps animal control. One of these gentlemen may not be safe to drive." Grandpa hung up the phone and looked at Chad. "Sheriff Johnson sends his regards. He'll be here in 5 minutes, along with a deputy who deals with public intoxication and property crime." Suddenly, Chad's party didn't seem like such a great idea. His friends quickly packed up, throwing trash all over the place. But Chad wasn't finished. As they loaded up the grill, he got in my face. "This isn't over, farm boy. The HOA board meets next week. And guess what's the top agenda item? Your little farm. Zoning violation, environmental impact. We're going to bury you in paperwork until you beg us to buy you out." I wanted to punch him so bad my fists were shaking, but Grandpa stepped between us. "Chad, I think you should leave now. The sheriff doesn't like to wait." Sheriff Johnson showed up 10 minutes later. We took him around and showed him the damage, the trash, and I gave him the play-by-play. He snapped pictures, wrote up a report, and promised additional patrols. As he was exiting, he pulled me aside. "Jake, this is going to get worse before it gets better. Chad's embarrassed now, and guys like him don't handle embarrassment good. Start documenting everything. Cameras, written reports, witness statements, build a case." I nodded, considering Chad's words regarding the HOA board meeting. "Sheriff, what can the HOA board actually do to us?" Sheriff Johnson let out a sigh. "More than they should, not as much as they think. With the right contacts at City Hall, they can make life difficult. File complaints, request inspections, lobby for zoning restrictions. It's all legal, but it's harassment if focused on one property." As he drove off, I gazed at the mess as Chad had left beer cans, cigarette butts, grease stains on our gravel. But as I stood there, I saw Grandpa was smiling. "Why are you smiling? They trash our property." Grandpa stooped down and picked up a beer can. "Because, my boy, they just made their first big mistake." Emily discovered what Grandpa meant by big mistake when she pulled up with legal documents and a camera. Texas has strong laws regarding property damage, trespassing, and public intoxication on private property. Every beer can, every cigarette butt, every grease stain was photographic evidence of criminal activity. "Jake, this is actually good news," Emily said as she documented the damage. "They escalated to criminal activity. That gives us clout we didn't have before." He spent 2 hours snapping pictures, measuring distances, cataloging every piece of trash. With Sheriff Johnson's report and this documentation, we can press charges. Criminal trespass, vandalism, littering, perhaps public intoxication. Grandpa nodded in approval. "Smart girl. Jake, you made a great choice." But our good feeling was short-lived. When Emily tried to press charges the following day, she ran into a brick wall. The desk sergeant was courteous but unhelpful. "Ma'am, based on our records, there was no crime reported at that address." Officer Morrison answered a call of threatening behavior by the property owners, but the complainants refused to prosecute Emily. Leaned across the desk, Sergeant Chad Morrison was let go by Austin PD 2 years ago. He's not law enforcement. The sergeant's face remained impassive. Ma'am, I can only act on what's in our system. If you want to make a complaint, you'll need to speak to internal affairs. When Emily phoned with the news I was ill, Chad had somehow managed to get his police friends to make a false report, making us sound like the troublemakers. This is crazy, I told her. How is this legal? Emily's voice was pinched with rage. It's not legal, it's fraud. Filing a false police report impersonating an officer, but it tells us Chad has deeper connections than we realized. Sheriff Johnson called by that night. When we told him what happened, his face went dark. I was afraid of this. Chad's got friends on the force. Guys like him, he weighed his words carefully. What Chad did, filing that false report, it's a felony. But it'll be impossible to prove his word against yours. And he's got friends supporting him. I felt doomed. So what do? Let him get away with it. Sheriff Johnson looked at Grandpa and some unspoken communication passed between them. Well, there are official routes and then there are unofficial solutions. Grandpa rocked back in his chair. Bob's right, Jake. Sometimes you can't fight the system from inside. Sometimes you have to beat it at its own game. The next couple of days passed quietly. Chad didn't park at our gate. No more surprise barbecues. I hope perhaps the police report had met whatever point he was trying to make. But Emily was jittery. Jake, this feels like the calm before the storm. Guys like Chad don't just give up. She was right. It began small. Just the feeling of being watched while working in the fields. Trucks that seemed to follow me into town. Phone calls that hung up when I answered. Then it got personal. Emily began getting text messages. At first innocent, saw you at the coffee shop today. You look nice. That's a pretty dress, but they grew quickly soon. You could do better than that farm boy. A smart girl like you shouldn't waste time on a loser. When Emily showed me the messages, my blood ran cold. The number was blocked, but we both knew who was behind them. Emily, you need to report this, she laughed bitterly, and tell them what that the guy they just supported with a false police report is stalking me. Jake, they're not going to help. The harassment lasted 2 weeks. Emily changed her number, but for some reason Chad got the new one. Your boyfriend doesn't deserve you. I could keep you safer than he can. You're making a mistake staying with him. Finally, Emily went to confront Chad directly against my advice. She drove to the HOA office to make a formal complaint. What happened next makes my blood boil. Emily found Chad behind the reception desk when she demanded to speak to Margaret Morrison Blackwell. Chad smiled. She's not in, but I'm happy to help. What can the HOA do for you today? Emily, the way he said her name, familiar possessive, made her skin crawl. I want you to stop sending me text messages, stop following me, stop harassing me. Chad's expression didn't waver. I think you're confused. I don't know what you're talking about. Emily showed him the messages, but Chad held up his hand. Emily, I think you might be under stress. Dating Jake Thompson can't be easy. All that financial pressure, the legal troubles your family's having. Maybe you're imagining things. That's when Emily realized how deep this went. Chad knew about her family, her background details he shouldn't have access to. How do you know about my family? Chad leaned back, completely relaxed. Emily, I'm in security. It's my responsibility to know about possible threats to our community. Your boyfriend's family has been marked as trouble. We're being careful. Emily turned to leave, but Chad's voice halted her. Emily, you're clever. You're going to be a lawyer. You've got your whole life to live. Don't let Jake Thompson bring you down. When his family loses that ranch, and they will, where are you going to be left? Emily spun back around, eyes flashing. Are you threatening me? Chad spread his hands innocently. Not at all. I'm giving you an option. A new start. I could assist you with that. The unstated meaning was clear. She walked away without another word, but Chad called after her. Consider it, Emily. You know where to find me when you're ready to be reasonable. When Emily shared with me what happened, I lost it completely. I wanted to hurt someone. Actually hurt them. I was halfway to my truck when Grandpa grabbed my arm. Jake, stop. Think I spun around, anger spilling out. Think Grandpa. He's stalking Emily. He's threatening her. Grandpa's grip tightened. And then what? You attack him, you go to jail, and he wins. Is that what you want? I wanted to argue. But I knew he was right. So what do we do? Let him get away with it? Grandpa's eyes had that dangerous look again. No, Jake, we don't let him get away with anything. But we do this smart. We do this right. He paused, looking toward the road where Chad's truck had been parked so many times. You know, I never told you the full story about that bridge in Vietnam, about what we did to Charlie after his 27th try to blow it up. I shook my head, still seething with anger. We didn't rebuild the bridge again. Jake, we constructed a trap that evening. Grandpa sat me down and explained about Operation Thunder Road, a covert mission in Vietnam that wasn't listed in any history books. The Viet Cong kept blowing up our bridges, he said. So we began constructing them to be blown up fake bridges that appeared real, but were engineered to fail when they placed explosives on them. In the meantime, we constructed the real bridges upstream, camouflaged and guarded. I was beginning to get it. You want us to give Chad a false target? Grandpa grinned. I want us to give Chad precisely what he believes he wants. Let him believe he's winning while we set up our true response. Over the course of a week, Grandpa implemented his scheme. It began with what appeared to be capitulation. Instead of fighting Chad when he returned to parking at our gate, we did nothing. We pretended to be defeated. Demoralized, I played my part, walking around with slumped shoulders, looking like a man who'd lost the will to fight. Emily avoided the ranch, and when she did visit, she parked at the rear of the property and snuck in through the fields. Meanwhile, Grandpa was making calls, plenty of calls to old Army friends, to local contractors, to the county planning department. When I asked him what he was doing, he just winked. Reconnaissance, Jake. Know your enemy, know his vulnerabilities, know the territory. Chad, believing he'd broken us, grew bolder. He began parking his truck overnight, leaving it at our gate from dusk until dawn. He began bringing friends again, not for parties this time, but for what appeared to be surveillance. They'd sit in their trucks, with binoculars watching our house, taking notes. Emily's harassment escalated as well. The text messages grew more explicit, more threatening. I know where you live. I know your routine. I know you're afraid. When she finally went to the police again, they told her the same thing. No evidence, no case. Sheriff Johnson tried to assist, but his hands were tied. Jake, I couldn't make an arrest based on anonymous text messages and circumstantial evidence. Chad's being too cautious. But Chad hadn't been as cautious as he'd thought. What he didn't realize was that Emily had brought in a cybersecurity expert from her law firm. They'd been tracking the text messages, tracing IP addresses, building a digital paper trail that led directly back to Chad. Jake, we've got him, Emily said to me with excitement one evening. The messages are being sent via a VPN, but there are metadata fingerprints that connect them to devices using the HOA office Wi-Fi. More importantly, we've got geolocation data that places the sender at places where Chad was known to be. I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks. Can we prosecute him based on this? Emily's smile didn't last. That's the rub. The evidence is technically admissible, but obtaining it necessitates a warrant, and obtaining a warrant necessitates probable cause. And the police won't seek probable cause because they don't believe that we have a case. It's a catch-22. That's when things took a turn for the worse. Chad, angered by our seeming acquiescence, decided to up the ante. He began coming onto our property when he believed we were away. We found footprints around our home, evidence that someone had been snooping through windows. Our mailbox was destroyed. Emily's tires were slashed on her car when she was visiting. But the worst happened on a Tuesday evening in May. I was in town at a late meeting with our feed supplier. When Chad made his move, Emily was home alone studying for her bar exam in our kitchen. She heard a truck pull up at around 9 p.m. and thought it was me driving home. When she peeked out the window and saw Chad's black Ram in our driveway, she panicked. Chad did not simply sit in his truck this time. He got out, walked up to our front door, started knocking, then pounding. Emily, I know you're in there. We need to talk. Emily called me first, then 911. But I was 20 minutes away and the police response time to our neighborhood was longer too. Chad continued pounding on the door, yelling threats and demands. You can't hide from me forever. Emily, I'm trying to help you here. Your boyfriend's family's going down. and you can either go down with them or come with me." Emily barricaded herself in our bedroom with Grandpa's old hunting rifle and waited. For 45 minutes, Chad paced around our house, peeping in windows, trying doors. "Jake can't. Don't make me do this the hard way." When I finally pulled up, Chad was gone, but he left his mark. Our flower garden was trashed, trampled flat. The windshield of Emily's car was shattered, and on our front door, scratched into the paint, with a knife or key, was a message. Last chance. Emily was in shock, clutching that rifle like her life depended on it. When I tried to hold her, she flinched away. "Jake, he's crazy, really crazy. He's not going to stop." I felt something break inside me. The woman I loved was traumatized, terrorized because of some psychopath with a badge complex and a grudge against my family. The police showed up 2 hours later. Same desk sergeant who had blown off Emily's complaints before he took a report, snapped photos of the damage. But when Emily tried to tell him about the stalking and harassment, he shut her down. "Ma'am, did you actually witness Mr. Morrison committing these acts of vandalism?" Emily looked at him in shock. "Are you serious? Who else would it be?" The sergeant shrugged. "Could have been anybody. Kids, maybe some nut with a grudge. Unless you've got direct evidence connecting Mr. Morrison to these crimes, there's not much we can do." I wanted to choke that cop with my bare hands. "What about the threats, the intimidation?" The sergeant's face didn't change. "What threats? According to our records, Mr. Morrison has been nothing but professional in his interactions with your family. If anything, you folks have been the aggressors." That's when I realized how deep Chad's connections went. He wasn't just sheltered by a few cop buddies. He had the whole system stacked in his corner. After the cops left, Emily completely broke down. "Jake, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm afraid to come here. I'm afraid to go home. I'm afraid to walk to my car alone." I held her as she cried. Anger and helplessness seethed inside me. But when I looked up, I saw Grandpa standing in the doorway. He wasn't staring at us. He was staring out into the darkness where Chad's truck had been parked. His face was serene, but his eyes were the coldest thing I'd ever seen. "Emily, honey," he said quietly, "why don't you pack a bag and stay at your sister's house for a few days? Jake and I need to have a talk." Emily looked up at him, tears still streaming down her face. "Mr. Thompson, I'm not going to let him run me off from Jake. This is my fight too." Grandpa smiled, and for the first time since this whole thing began, it was his warm grandfather's smile. "Oh, sweetheart, you're not going anywhere for good. You're just going to be safe while Jake and I take care of some business." He went over to the closet and pulled out an old box I'd never seen before. When he opened it, I saw maps, photos, and what appeared to be military planning documents. "Jake," he said, pulling out a manila folder, "it's time I told you about Operation Sweet Creek." In that dusty old box was a lifetime of secrets maps of our property, decades back, legal documents, and military intelligence reports. But the most fascinating thing was a folder marked Property Rights and Easements Confidential. Grandpa spread everything out on our kitchen table like a general preparing for battle. "Jake, what do you know about Sweet Creek?" I stared at him blankly. Sweet Creek was just a small stream running through our back. 40 I'd played there as a kid, caught crawfish, built dams. "Not much, Grandpa, it's been there always." Grandpa smiled. "Always is right. And according to Texas water rights law, it makes us very special." He pulled out a surveyor's map from 1923. "When your great-grandfather purchased this land, Sweet Creek was the natural boundary. The HOA subdivision was constructed on the other side. Their property line stops at the water's edge. I studied the map trying to get it. So we own the creek." Grandpa's smile grew wider. "We own the creek bed, and 20 feet on either side. Water rights, mineral rights, access rights, everything." He pulled out another document. "Chad's been parking specifically in a spot that's ideal for what the Army Corps of Engineers refers to as a strategic relocation." I was beginning to get it. "You mean we can legally move his truck?" Grandpa chuckled. "According to Texas property law, any vehicle abandoned on private property for more than 72 hours becomes the legal responsibility of the property owner. We can impound it, store it, and charge storage fees." I felt excitement building, but Chad moves it every few days. Grandpa's eyes twinkled. "Does he? Are you sure?" The next morning, Grandpa took me by what he meant. Chad's truck was parked in its usual place, but there was something different. Then Grandpa gave me binoculars. Look at the license plate. I focused and almost dropped them. Same make, model, and color as this truck is owned by Jimmy Patterson, one of Chad's drinking buddies. I lowered the binoculars, confused. But why Grandpa's smile was predatory? Because Chad thinks he's getting smart. He's rotating vehicles. Different truck, different owner, same harassment. But Grandpa had been keeping track. Photos, timestamps, license plate numbers. He documented every vehicle, every visitor, every incident. Jake, I want you to meet someone. That afternoon, a woman in her 50s pulled up dressed in a business suit, slim black pants, a tailored white blouse, and a conservative navy blue business suit. This is Margaret Sullivan. She's what they call a demolition lawyer. Margaret Sullivan looked like someone you didn't want to face in court. Sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a handshake that said she'd crush stronger men for breakfast. Mr. Thompson, what Mr. Morrison and the HOA have been doing isn't just harassment, it's racketeering. She opened her briefcase. I specialize in cases where local authorities have been corrupted. Your Chad Morrison is small time compared to some cases I've handled. Margaret spent 2 hours going over everything. The text messages, property damage, false police reports, the escalation pattern. What really caught her attention was Grandpa's documentation of the vehicle rotation scheme. This is great evidence of organized harassment. In federal court, this would qualify as conspiracy under RICO statutes. As if on cue, Emily's phone buzzed. This message was different. Direct time's up 24 hours to convince your boyfriend to sell. After that, things got unpleasant. Margaret took a picture of it. That's a straight-out threat. We can get a restraining order. But Grandpa shook his head. Restraining orders don't stop guys like Chad. They just make them more sly. Margaret sensed undercurrents she hadn't realized. Mr. Thompson. What are you proposing? Grandpa walked over to the window, staring at the truck at our gate. Miss Sullivan, you deal with the legal stuff. Jake and I are going to deal with the practical stuff. That nasty look was back in his eyes. Chad wants to play games with property rights. Fine, let's play. I wanted to stay with Grandpa, but he wasn't having it. Emily's the priority. Chad's unstable. And if this goes south, she's the one who's really at risk. Emily was pacing the kitchen, her energy tense, radiating from her. Jake, what's going on out there? I heard trucks. I described what we'd seen, and Emily's face went white. We need to call 911. I shook my head. Emily, they aren't coming. Not in time before I could say anything else. Chad's voice boomed through a bullhorn. Jake Thompson. Get out here, we need to talk. Emily grabbed my arm. Don't go, it's what he wants. Outside, Chad continued shouting threats. I counted 6 vehicles, engines growling like hungry predators. That's when we heard the excavator roaring to life. Through the window, we saw its lights moving like the eyes of some metal monster. Chad's voice cracked with uncertainty. What the hell is that, old man? You better not be doing something stupid. Emily and I hurried to the front window. What we saw made my jaw drop. Grandpa sat at the excavator's wheel wearing his old army helmet, steering the huge machine towards Chad's actual Ram 2500, parked at our gate. Chad and his friends stood around their trucks, clearly not anticipating this reply. Is that crazy, old man? Chad yelled. He can't do that. But Grandpa halted 10 feet from the truck and switched off the engine. The silence was oppressive, then his voice boomed across the night. Chad Morrison, you're on private property. Trespassing, 5 minutes to vacate your vehicles and get off. Chad's reply was prompt. Old man, this is HOA property. That is when Grandpa produced a wad of formal documents. According to these county surveys, you are parked on Thompson family land. This vehicle has been abandoned on our property for over 72 hours under Texas property code. I'm asserting salvage right. Chad was incensed. That truck hasn't been here 3 days. Grandpa grinned. Jimmy Patterson's truck hasn't. Your truck has been here since Monday morning, 80 hours and counting. He pointed to our security cameras, full video documentation available. Chad gazed wildly, realizing he'd been outsmarted. Instead of backing off, he produced his phony badge. I'm detaining you by citizen's arrest. He'd progressed halfway to the excavator when headlights illuminated the scene. Sheriff Department vehicles rolled up quickly, 4 patrol cars and Sheriff Johnson's truck, all with flashing emergency lights. Everyone freeze hands where we can see them. Chad came to a halt as officers streamed out with guns drawn. Sheriff Johnson, she reported it stolen 3 hours ago. I felt Emily's hand tighten around mine as the pieces fitted. Chad looked desperate, cornered and screwed. That's impossible. Margaret gave me permission? Sheriff Johnson nodded to his deputies. She just signed a sworn declaration saying she's never given you permission to take any of her vehicles. She's charging theft, harassment, and fraud. Chad's eyes scanning the area like a caged animal. This is a setup, Sheriff Johnson exhaled. Chad, you're under arrest for car theft, harassment, stalking, trespassing, impersonating an officer, and about a dozen other charges. That's when Chad lost it entirely. He lunged towards his truck, likely thinking he could get away, but he'd forgotten about the excavator and Grandpa. What followed was poetry in motion. As Chad ran, Grandpa revved up the excavator. The big machine swung into action, its bucket sweeping in a perfect arc. It didn't touch Chad. Grandpa was too accurate. Instead, it scooped up the front end of the ram like picking up a toy. The truck's rear wheels left the ground as the excavator lifted at 8 feet above Sweet Creek. Chad stopped and gazed at his truck suspended above Sweet Creek. What the hell are you doing? Grandpa's tone was serene now. Just helping you learn property rights? Son, this truck was abandoned on my property, making me responsible to dispose of properly. He worked it so the truck hung straight above the deepest point of Sweet Creek. Now I could haul it to an impound lot for $500, or the truck swayed gently above the dark water. Sheriff Johnson was smiling. Chad, I listened to what Mr. Thompson has to say. Chad panicked. You can't do this. That's destruction of property? Grandpa leaned on his chin thoughtfully. Is it technically this vehicle was abandoned on my property? Under Texas law, I have the right to dispose of abandoned property as I see fit. Plus, there's all the damages you've done. I figure this truck's value covers what you owe me. Chad's face purple. I'll sue you. I'll have your ranch, Sheriff Johnson interrupted Chad. You're going to be charged with enough felonies to send you away for 10 years. You're not suing anyone. Grandpa looked over at the sheriff, bob any legal requirement to preserve stolen property as evidence. Sheriff Johnson acted like he was considering. Well, Hal, we've got a bunch of evidence photos from video witness testimony. One more photo for the case file would be enough. Emily and I stood by and watched as Grandpa opened the bucket of the excavator. Chad's truck tipped forward, swayed, then smashed into Sweet Creek in a huge wave that bounced off the hills. Chad emitted a wail-like cry, as if someone had murdered his dog. My truck, you destroyed my truck. Grandpa climbed down calmly. Your truck thought you said it was Margaret's. Chad charged at Grandpa, but deputies stopped him before he took 3 steps. As he was being handcuffed, Chad cursed and screamed threats, but the sounds of cheers drowned them out. Not only from us, but from our neighbors too, who'd come out of the darkness to observe Sheriff Johnson approach Grandpa. How that was beautiful, completely legal, fully justified, and absolutely perfect. 6 months later, Chad Morrison was convicted to 8 years in prison. Margaret Morrison Blackwell compensated all damages, plus sizable settlement for harassment. She terminated the HOA security program and became an unlikely friend. Emily passed the bar and started a practice. Our ranch is serene now. We use that area near the creek for family barbecues, where Emily delights in recounting visitors about the night Grandpa taught a small-town dictator a lesson or two in gravity and property rights. And every time I hear Sweet Creek running, I think of the most important thing Grandpa taught me. Never underestimate an 80-year-old farmer with an excavator and 40 years of experience teaching fools about boundaries. HOA vibes, where reality becomes fiction and fiction hopes it is this salacious hit that like prelude to the next bombshell.